Hi guys, welcome to another episode of I wonder which side she's gonna pick. Today, on why Philip Larkin's poem "This Be the Verse" is not an edgelord poem, but actually is, yes, a universal truth. This is the trauma dumping episode. I'm going to go through the rubric like systematically, just because I feel like it's really easy to oversimplify this discussion. So I feel like it also all interlinks. So I just want to begin by talking about the tone, which to me reads as quite cynical. However, I think that it's just so like simple um and accessible, and I feel like given the language, I think that what is happening here is it's meant to be shocking, but I think that despite all of that it's just effective anyway. The language within the poem, I think that for a lot of people, the counter argument to this would be, um, he's just doing it to shock the reader, therefore it's just like edgy. But I honestly feel like this is gonna be just like the last discussion where everybody was strikingly on my side, which is that it's not cynicism, it's not like edgelord nonsense. Um, and I think that what adds to this is kind of the flop at the end. Um, Man hands on misery to man, it deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. So we see here, let's dive into the philosophical uh, um, context behind this. So as we know in church going, uh, Larkin is a bit of an existentialist, but not in the freeing way, simply in the nothing matters, life doesn't matter, and I don't have a purpose because I choose not to be religious. Um, but I also choose not to find my own meaning, so I'm just going to be sad. That's the type of existentialist that Philip Larkin is. So we kind of see this rejection of like the typical, like, I mean, I can't call it an American dream because this is not American literature, but the like the typical standard by which one is to um supposed to find like meaning within life. So that would be like having a family and having children, and he's rejecting that, which is an interesting thing to me. This would have been controversial at this time, so there's just layers of controversy within this poem. Um, so he's kind of taking, honestly, quite an absurdist uh, footing in this, in that he's rebelling against life having no meaning, right? He's rebelling against life itself. He's like, I'm not gonna even try to have a meaning. I'm just gonna um strive for something because that's all I can do. All I can do is find fulfillment in life, just bare bones life. That's what absurdism is, right? So my initial interpretation of this poem was that I related to it. I was like, "Oh, yes." And I don't I'm going to get a little bit personal on this one. I was like, "Oh, this is true. This is so true because uh this happens in my family. Like, I don't have much in common with my extended family, but it's like the line that links all of us is mental illness. Um and I'm like, "Oh, I see this." And I'm like, "Oh, this is 100% generational trauma." It's like, "Oh, my grandpa was an alcoholic, and then my hypothetically, not I'm not using my life experience here. I'm like, my grandpa was an alcoholic, and then my dad was a drug user, and now I have addiction issues." Like, hypothetically, that's not the truth. Um and and I'm like, Yeah, so this is relatable, but I also think that we should examine the historical context here, because this is at a point where if we look at Larkin, he is truly a modernist. I just realized how crooked my glasses are. My dog sat on my glasses. Anyway, if we look at Larkin and the style of his poetry, we do see this like abandoning of um the traditional way that poetry had been approached before. So like everything up until this point is like an homage to literature. There are full of allusions, full of references to like the Bible and to Greek mythology. Lots of big words, lots of playing with language. But then as we shift to the modernist era, we see this rejection of that in favor of simplistic structure and words. We still see a little bit of this rhythmic style, but it's kind of used to a different effect. He does a good job. He does a good job at somehow keeping the rhythm, but not making it sound like singy songy. And I think it may be slightly more apparent in church going, but we do see it here. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had, and add some extra just for you. So we kind of have this like playful tone. So what I think he's trying to do here is he's trying to make light of this thing that is like a universal experience, because I completely abandoned what I was talking about before. So I'll go back to that and then go back to what I was talking about before that. Oops. So what we have here is an abandonment of poetic structure in the way that it was before, and I think that that is also representative of changing times. And we see in his religious views this acknowledgement of times changing, but in that we have to acknowledge that there's kind of a shift going on here between his parents' generation and his generation. So that's kind of where we get this cynical like idea from. And although I do think that this is like, I do think that this is rooted in his personal experience, or at least that's how I see it. I see it as rooted in my own personal experience. I do think that this is something that's applicable across generations and across cultures, because he believes, and as do I, that it is a universal truth. Oh, so back to what I was talking about before, which was the tone being humorous. I think that what's going on here is that, especially with the language as well, what he's really trying to do is make this accessible and therefore make light of the issue at hand, because it's a lot easier to cope with things like this when we make it lighthearted. It would be more difficult for you to digest if I just completely like threw up all of my the bad things that happened to me onto you. But if I was like my mom's coworkers see her more than I do. If I said something silly like that, it would be funnier than if I said, yeah, like I barely see my mom because, you know, I think that that was not a very strong example, but I hope that I'm getting my point across here. That it's more digestible that way, and I think that that's really truly speaks to the fact that this is a universal thing as well. And I think that what could lend to the like generational part is they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. So it's like this happened to people before them, and so it's happened to you, and so on and so forth. So he's like, end the cycle, don't have kids. So really, this is about generational trauma. Not to get all woke and bring out the buzzwords, but That's what it's about, guys.